silence fell over the Galactic Assembly as the mandate echoed through the cavernous hall. Every species originating from a high-gravity hyperpredatory planet was officially exiled from the core worlds. Panic erupted among the delegates. Yet Ambassador Richard Cole simply adjusted his tie, poured some coffee, and sat down. He smiled. Diplomatic translation implants were a marvel of modern neural linguistics. To ensure smooth negotiations and prevent the catastrophic mispronunciation of alien dialects, humanity had long ago hard-coded their localizers to assign standard Western names to extraterrestrial dignitaries based on their diplomatic profiles. It was a controversial decision back on Earth, but in the sprawling chambers of the Galactic Council, it kept things terrifyingly relatable. High Magistrate Bartholomew, a towering, multi-limbed entity whose actual name sounded like glass grinding against granite, slammed his ceremonial gavel. The kinetic shockwave rippled through the anti-grav seating tiers of the Grand Assembly. Resolution 819 is hereby ratified. Bartholomew's voice boomed, perfectly translated into authoritative Oxford-accented English in Richard Cole's earpiece. By order of the High Council, all species classified as Death Worlders, those hailing from Class 10 biomes or higher, are deemed an inherent biological and sociological threat to galactic peace. Effective immediately, their representatives are stripped of voting rights and their populations are banned from traversing the core sectors. Pandemonium broke loose. To Cole's left, a massive armored delegate named Arthur, representing a subterranean warrior race from a volcanic world, roared in defiance, his mandibles snapping aggressively. To his right, Senator Diana, an elegant but lethal silicon-based life form, stood abruptly, her crystalline appendages glowing a dangerous shade of crimson. They were the outliers, the survivors, species forged in the fires of tectonic instability, hyper-predators, and constant atmospheric radiation. The Council comprised largely of fragile ancient races from idyllic garden worlds had always feared them. Today, fear had finally metastasized into legislation. Security drones descended from the vaulted ceiling, their plasma batteries whining as they charged. Commander Maxwell, the head of orbital security, a hulking, grey-skinned bruiser in a tailored military uniform, stepped up to the podium beside Bartholomew. Any delegate falling under the Class 10 designation must vacate the chamber. Maxwell ordered, his hand resting casually on the hilt of a kinetic disruptor. Resistance will be met with immediate pacification and orbital detainment. Arthur spat a glob of acidic saliva onto the polished marble floor, cursing the Council's cowardice before turning his massive bulk and storming out, surrounded by a dozen nervous security drones. Diana followed shortly after, her expression unreadable, though the temperature in the room dropped several degrees as she passed. One by one, the galaxy's most resilient and terrifying species were humiliated and escorted from the pinnacle of galactic governance. The Garden Worlders watched with a mix of relief and smug satisfaction. The natural order in their eyes was being restored. Then there was humanity. Earth was a textbook, Class 11 Death World. It was a spinning marble of tectonic volatility, extreme weather patterns, deadly microorganisms, and apex predators. Humans themselves were an anomaly, fragile-looking flesh sacks with no natural armor, no venom, and terrible night vision. Yet they possessed a terrifying endurance, an uncanny ability to heal from catastrophic trauma, and a psychological baseline that the rest of the galaxy classified as borderline psychopathic. Richard Cole did not stand up. He did not yell. A former senior executive at Lockheed Martin, who had transitioned into interstellar diplomacy, Cole was intimately familiar with the theater of intimidation. He had negotiated military-grade titanium contracts with warlords and navigated the cutthroat boardrooms of the Pentagon. A room full of soft-skinned aliens playing politics did not impress him. Instead of leaving, Cole calmly unlatched his leather briefcase. He pulled out a steel thermos, unscrewed the cap, and poured a steaming cup of dark roast coffee. The ceramic cup clicked softly against the metallic surface of his desk. He took a slow, deliberate sip, crossed his legs, and smiled pleasantly at the podium. The silence that followed was heavier than the gravity on Earth. Bartholomew's 4 primary eyes narrowed, focusing entirely on the human delegate. The murmur of the assembly died down completely. A human was still in the room. A human was drinking a caffeinated beverage, a known neurotoxin to half the species present, and smiling. Ambassador Cole, Bartholomew said, his voice vibrating with barely contained irritation. Perhaps your translation implant is malfunctioning. Resolution 819 applies to all Class 10 and above species. Humanity hails from a Class 11 biome. You are legally required to vacate this seat and depart the core sectors. Cole placed his cup down. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke charcoal suit and leaned toward his microphone. My implant is functioning perfectly. Magistrate Bartholomew. Cole replied, his voice smooth, carrying the relaxed cadence of a man holding a royal flush. I heard the resolution. It's a fascinating piece of legislation, quite sweeping. But I'm afraid I'll be staying right here. A collective gasp echoed through the assembly. It was unthinkable. Defying a direct mandate from the High Magistrate in the Grand Assembly wasn't just a political faux pas. It was grounds for immediate imprisonment. Commander Maxwell stepped forward, signaling 2 heavily armed security drones to flank the human's desk. Ambassador, you are in direct violation of interstellar law. Stand up and follow me, or I will use force. I assure you, your biological resilience will not protect you from a localized plasma discharge. Cole didn't even look at the security chief. He kept his eyes locked on Bartholomew. Force won't be necessary, Commander Maxwell, because I am not in violation of interstellar law. In fact, under the rigid, infallible bureaucracy of this very council, I have every right to sit in this chair. Bartholomew let out a low, clicking hiss. Do not play games, human. The geophysical and biological data of Sol 3 is a matter of public record. Extreme atmospheric shifts, predatory flora and fauna, microscopic pathogens capable of wiping out entire planetary populations. You are a death worlder. Am I? Cole asked, raising a single groomed eyebrow. He reached into his briefcase and withdrew a sleek, transparent data slate, tapping the screen a few times before flicking it toward the center of the room. A massive holographic projection bloomed above the assembly floor. It was an official Galactic Council registry document, stamped with the unmistakable golden seal of the Bureau of Planetary Colonization. As you all know, Cole began pacing his words perfectly. Humanity's first contact with the wider galaxy was not initiated by a grand unified government vessel. It was initiated by an automated retrofitted SpaceX deep-range surveyor probe acting under a joint contract with General Dynamics. When that probe pinged the Council's border buoys 68 Earth years ago, it automatically filed our planetary classification to establish a trade corridor. Bartholomew squinted at the floating document. What is the meaning of this? The meaning magistrate is clerical. Cole smiled, showing his teeth a primate threat display that made several nearby delegates flinch. The AI on board that SpaceX drone suffered a minor localized glitch due to cosmic radiation. When it filled out the Council's archaic 10,000-page registration form, it didn't classify Earth as a Class 11 death world. Cole zoomed in on a specific line of text in the hologram. It was highlighted in bright, undeniable green. It classified Earth as a Class 3 agricultural and light manufacturing zone, Cole read aloud. And because the Council's bureaucracy is famously glacial, and because your own laws stipulate that original classification documents are immutable without a millennium-long review process, legally speaking, humanity does not come from a death world. We come from a very aggressive farm. A stunned murmur rippled through the delegates. Maxwell stepped forward, his face flushed with purple rage. This is a technicality, a blatant manipulation of the system. You know what you are, and we know what you are. What I know, Maxwell? Cole said, his voice suddenly losing its polite warmth and dropping an octave, is that the law is the law. You garden worlders pride yourselves on being the bastions of legal absolute. You built your entire civilization on the idea that paperwork and legislation triumph over brute force. Are you telling me that today you intend to ignore your own sacred laws just because you're scared of us? Bartholomew slammed his gavel again, though this time it seemed to lack its previous authority. A clerical error does not negate the spirit of the resolution. We will have the classification amended. That process takes 1,000 standard years, Cole reminded him cheerfully. Until then, I keep my seat. But let's drop the legal theater for a moment, Bartholomew. Let's talk about the real reason I'm sitting here, and the real reason you aren't going to lay a single finger on me. Cole stood up. Though he was shorter than Maxwell and Bartholomew, his presence suddenly filled the room. The relaxed corporate diplomat vanished, replaced by the grim representative of a species that had perfected the art of war before they even discovered penicillin. You passed this mandate because you're terrified of the fringe borders, Cole said, his voice echoing without the need for the microphone. You expelled Arthur's people and Diana's people because you think isolating yourselves in the core worlds will keep you safe from the outer rim incursions. You want to pretend the galaxy is a safe, peaceful garden. Cole pointed a finger at the High Magistrate. But who built the fences around your garden, Bartholomew? The hall was dead silent. When the Council needed an orbital defense grid that wouldn't shatter under kinetic bombardment, you didn't hire the artisans of Prime 7. You gave the contract to Boeing Stellar. When your flagship dreadnoughts kept suffering engine failures in deep space, you came begging to Earth for human-engineered fusion cores because your scientists were too terrified to work with volatile antimatter. Cole began to walk slowly down the aisle, right toward the center podium. The security drones tracked him, but Maxwell didn't give the order to fire. 80% of the Council's military-industrial complex is currently outsourced to private human corporations. Cole stated, his voice ringing with cold, hard facts. Our engineers maintain your planetary shields. Our private military contractors, veterans of 100 brutal conflicts on a world you just tried to ban us from, are currently serving as the frontline officers in your own border defense forces. He stopped a few feet away from the podium, looking up at the towering alien leaders. If you expel humanity, if you physically remove me from this room, Cole said softly, yet loud enough for every microphone to catch it, I will make one comlink call to Geneva. Within 30 minutes, every human contractor in the galaxy will pack up and go home. We will take our fusion cores. We will take our targeting algorithms. We will shut down the Boeing defense grids. We will leave you sitting in the dark, entirely defenseless, surrounded by a galaxy that hates you. Cole smiled again, a chilling, dead-eyed expression. So, Magistrate Bartholomew, Commander Maxwell, I highly suggest you respect the SpaceX clerical error, because if you decide to declare humanity a death world species today, we will happily show you exactly why we earned that title. The hum of the security drones suddenly sounded very loud in the absolute terrified silence of the Grand Assembly. Tension practically hummed in the air, thick enough to choke on. High Magistrate Bartholomew stared down at Ambassador Richard Cole, his primary eyes wide, with a mixture of profound indignation and creeping horror. Security Chief Maxwell's hand hovered inches from his kinetic disruptor, his heavy grey fingers twitching, awaiting an order that his superiors were suddenly too terrified to give. Bartholomew's mandibles clicked rapidly, a nervous tick that the diplomatic translators politely filtered out as heavy breathing. He looked to the other delegates, representatives of peaceful, highly evolved garden worlds, who had never known the sting of an atmosphere that tried to freeze them or predators that hunted them in the dark. They were entirely unequipped to handle a physical, tangible threat sitting inside their own chambers. "You are bluffing, Cole," Maxwell snarled, breaking the silence. He took a heavy step forward, his combat boots thudding against the marble. "The logistics of a galaxy-wide contractor strike are impossible. You cannot coordinate a total withdrawal of human personnel without catastrophic financial losses to your own mega-corporations." Cole didn't flinch. He slowly reached into his suit jacket. Maxwell drew his weapon instantly, the plasma coil whining to full charge. "Stand down, Commander," Cole said softly, withdrawing nothing more lethal than a slim, matte black smartphone. "You severely underestimate the unity of our corporate sectors when our species is threatened. You think Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, and Raytheon care about a quarterly loss when the alternative is orbital detainment. We wrote the book on mutually assured destruction." Before Maxwell could retort, a deafening, oscillating klaxon shattered the quiet of the Grand Assembly. The ambient lighting of the chamber instantly shifted from a soothing bioluminescent blue to a harsh, strobing crimson. The holographic seal of the Galactic Council above the central podium vanished, replaced by a massive, rotating tactical map of the core sectors. Sirens wailed, and panic immediately erupted among the Garden World delegates. Several fainted. Others scrambled under their anti-grav desks in a pathetic display of self-preservation. Bartholomew slammed his hands onto his console. "Order, I demand order. Central Intelligence Report." A synthesized, distinctly non-human voice echoed through the chamber speakers. "Priority alert. Outer rim perimeter breach detected in Sector 4. Unidentified hostile fleet composition. Signatures match the devouring swarm classification. Threat level extinction." Maxwell's face drained of color. His weapon dropped to his side. "The swarm, that's impossible. Sector 4 is guarded by the volcanic phalanx." "Correction," Cole said, his voice cutting through the panic like a scalpel. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked at his watch. Sector 4 was guarded by the volcanic phalanx, but about 20 minutes ago, you expelled their representative, Arthur. As a fiercely loyal and pragmatic people, the subterranean warriors immediately issued a recall order to their border fleets. They are currently packing up and abandoning the perimeter. You literally opened the gate and told the guards to go home. Bartholomew's multiple limbs trembled as he stared at the tactical map. Hundreds of red dots were spilling into the core sectors, bypassing the now empty checkpoints. "Maxwell, scramble the home fleet. Activate the planetary defense grids." "Sir." Maxwell stammered frantically, tapping at his wrist-mounted tactical pad. "The home fleet is largely ceremonial. We rely on the heavy cruisers from the Silicon Protectorate to lead our vanguard, and you just kicked Senator Diana out too." Cole chimed in, taking another sip of his coffee. He leaned back against his desk, watching the chaos unfold with the detached interest of a man watching a predictable movie. "Her people provide the crystalline ablative armor for your dreadnoughts. Without them, your ships are just floating tin cans. I'd say you have about 4 hours before the swarm reaches the capital's airspace." "Activate the orbital shields," Bartholomew shrieked, ignoring the human. "Power up the Boeing Stellar defense grid." Maxwell tapped, furiously, sweat pouring down his grey brow. A sickening buzz echoed from his console. "Magistrate, the grid is locked. It's requiring a level 10 biometric override to initiate high-yield plasma deflection. Slowly, inevitably, Bartholomew and Maxwell turned their gazes back to the human ambassador. Cole offered a polite, apologetic shrug. Standard contractual clause, Section 4, Paragraph B of the Boeing Stellar Maintenance Agreement. In the event of hostile political action against human personnel, all proprietary defense software enters a localized lockdown to prevent intellectual property theft. You tried to legally banish us, Bartholomew? The system thinks you're hostile? You monstrous primate! Bartholomew roared, his diplomatic composure entirely shattered. You orchestrated this. You knew the swarm was probing Sector 4. I am a diplomat, magistrate, not a clairvoyant. Cole replied, his voice hardening, stripping away the polite veneer completely. I didn't orchestrate the swarm. I merely read the Palantir predictive intelligence reports your pacifist council ignored because they were too aggressive. I warned you last cycle that removing the Death Worlders would leave a tactical void. You chose to legislate biology instead of military reality. The red dots on the holographic map advanced with terrifying speed. The core worlds, completely stripped of their hardened warriors, and human-operated technology were entirely defenseless. The Garden Worlders were screaming, demanding someone do something. "Unlock the grid, Ambassador!" Maxwell ordered, raising his weapon again, his hands shaking. "Unlock it now, or I will kill you right here." "Shoot me," Cole said, staring directly down the barrel of the plasma disruptor. His heart rate, monitored by the Council's own biometrics, didn't spike a single beat. "Shoot me, and the lockdown becomes permanent. The encryption key dies with my neural implant. You will all burn, and humanity will survive in the Outer Rim with Arthur and Diana's people. We thrive in hellscapes, Commander. You merely burn in them." Maxwell swallowed hard, slowly, lowering the weapon. He looked at Bartholomew, utterly defeated. He has us magistrate. We have no vanguard. We have no shields." Bartholomew slumped in his elevated podium, the grandiose magistrate reduced to a terrified bureaucrat. "What are your terms, human?" Cole didn't gloat. He didn't cheer. He simply placed his coffee cup down and picked up his smartphone. "My terms are incredibly simple, Bartholomew. First Resolution 819 is permanently revoked, not suspended, revoked, struck from the Galactic Charter." "Done," Bartholomew wheezed. Second, a formal public apology is to be issued to the subterranean warriors, the silicon-based life forms, and every other Class 10 species you insulted today. You will beg them to return, and you will double their hazard pay. The Council Treasury cannot support. You will double their hazard pay. Cole interrupted, his voice like cracking ice. Or you can negotiate finances with the devouring swarm. Bartholomew closed his eyes. "Agreed." Third, Cole said, stepping out from behind his desk and walking to the center of the chamber. He looked up at the massive tactical map, watching the red swarm approaching the core. "Executive control of the core sector defense forces is immediately transferred to United States Space Command and our allied private contractors. We will not allow Garden World politicians to micromanage a war of extermination." The remaining delegates gasped. This was a total military coup. Humanity was legally seizing control of the galaxy's entire defense apparatus without firing a single shot. You are asking us to surrender our sovereignty," Maxwell whispered. "I am offering you survival," Cole corrected him. "You have 60 seconds to decide before the swarm breaches the inner asteroid belt." Bartholomew looked at the terrified faces of the assembly. He looked at the red tide on the map. Finally, he slammed his gavel down, though his hand shook so violently he nearly dropped it. "Emergency powers granted to the human delegation. May the Creators have mercy on us." "The Creators are busy," Cole said coldly. "So you'll have to settle for us." Cole lifted his smartphone to his ear. He didn't speak to an alien general or a mystical warlord. He spoke to a human corporate director sitting in a secure bunker in Virginia. "Director Harrison, we have executive green light. Initiate Protocol Jericho." "Copy that, Ambassador." A crisp professional voice crackled over the chamber's audio feed. "Palantir AI target locks confirmed. Northrop Grumman automated kill vehicles deploying from lunar stealth orbits. Raytheon deep space interdiction batteries spooling up. Say the word." "Wipe them out," Cole ordered. What happened next was broadcast live across the Galactic Council's holographic displays, an event that would be studied in military academies for 1,000 years. The Garden Worlders had expected a desperate, bloody struggle. They expected ships firing broadsides, valiant sacrifices, and chaotic dogfights. They expected a war. Humanity gave them an extermination. From the dark space surrounding the capital planet, hundreds of heavily modified, unmanned defense platforms dropped their active camouflage. They didn't look elegant. They were ugly, brutalist chunks of dark grey armor and exposed weaponry built by corporations that prioritized lethality over aesthetics. In perfect AI-synchronized unison, the platforms fired. There were no visible lasers, no glowing plasma bolts. It was a purely kinetic assault. Tungsten rods accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light by massive rail guns crossed the distance between the platforms and the swarm fleet in seconds. The swarm never even registered the attack. On the tactical map, the vanguard of the Red Tide simply ceased to exist. Thousands of hostile biological ships were shattered into cosmic dust before they could fire a single countermeasure. "Target Sequence 1 complete!" Harrison's voice droned calmly over the speakers, realigning for Sequence 2. Orbital defense shields are now online and holding at maximum capacity. Boeing confirms optimal power flow from the fusion cores. The massive transparent energy barrier rippled to life around the capital world, bathing the Senate floor in a protective golden hue. "Swarm fleet is attempting a tactical retreat," Harrison noted, sounding almost bored. "They are breaking formation. Do not permit retreat." "Director," Cole commanded. "They breached the core, set an example." "Understood. Releasing automated drone swarms. Lockheed Martin confirms missile lock on all fleeing biologicals." The sheer cold efficiency of the slaughter left the alien delegates paralyzed. This wasn't the frantic, rage-fueled combat they had associated with Death Worlders. This was an industrialized, calculated deletion of an enemy force. It was math applied to violence. It was terrifying. Within exactly 14 minutes, the massive invasion force that had threatened to consume the capital was reduced to a scattering of lifeless debris. The red dots on the holographic map vanished, entirely replaced by the calm, blinking green icons of human-operated defense platforms. "Threat neutralized, Ambassador Cole," Harrison reported. "Space Command will maintain high alert status. We are sending a diplomatic convoy to escort Arthur and Diana back to the capital." "Thank you, Director." Cole out. The human ambassador slipped his phone back into his suit pocket. He walked slowly back to his desk, the silence in the room so absolute that the soft click of his leather shoes sounded like hammer blows. He picked up his thermos, poured the last half cup of dark roast coffee, and took a sip. It was lukewarm now, but he didn't mind. He looked up at High Magistrate Bartholomew, who was trembling violently in his elevated seat, his eyes locked on the human with a new, profound understanding of fear. The other delegates were frozen, staring at the fragile, soft-skinned primate who had just orchestrated the annihilation of a star fleet with a phone call. As I was saying before, we were so rudely interrupted. Cole smiled, adjusting his tie. Humanity does not come from a death world. We come from an agricultural and light manufacturing zone, and as long as you respect our contracts, our engineering, and our right to sit in this room alongside our heavily armored friends—" Cole leaned forward, resting his hands flat on the desk, his eyes locking onto Bartholomew's. "We will continue to manufacture your safety. But if you ever try to legislate us into a corner again—" Cole didn't need to finish the sentence. The smoking debris of the swarm fleet, floating in the cold vacuum of space, finished it for him. Commander Maxwell took a slow step backward, lowering his head in a gesture of submission. One by one, the other delegates followed suit, unable to meet the human's gaze. The hierarchy of the galaxy had just been rewritten, not by brute strength, but by a species that understood that true power wasn't just surviving a death world, it was mass-producing its fury. Cole sat back down in his chair, opened his briefcase, and pulled out a stack of physical paper contracts. "Now," Cole said cheerfully, tapping the papers against the desk, "let's talk about renegotiating our defense budget. I believe a 20% increase is in order. If you enjoyed this deep dive into humanity's absolute dominance through bureaucracy, military-industrial might, and cold-blooded strategy, don't leave just yet. Hit that like button to appease the algorithm. Share this story with your fellow sci-fi fans to spread the HFY glory, and subscribe to the channel for more epic tales, where humans prove why we are the undeniable apex predators of the cosmos. See you in the next one.